to discuss the raging controversy or rift between the National Security Advisor and the Chief of Staff of the Presidency is Dr. Seteolu of the Department of Political Science, Lagos State University. It's a pleasure having you on SaharaTV, sir.
Oh, my pleasure.
Let me start by getting your reaction to the face-off between the National Security Advisor, Babagana, Monguno, and the Chief of Staff, Abba Kyari. What's your initial reaction to this face-off between the president's men?
Well, the face of signposts the the perception that the president is not exercising political authority. You know, you recall that there had been fears that the president is a laid-back president. There had been fear that he's not assertive. Um, that there had been fear that he has the least clue about how to manage the state and the economy. Um, and the perception is not new that some other interests within the presidency are you know, hijacking his role. Now, actually, the staging what should ordinarily be the powers and responsibilities of the president. It raises question about an, an absentee president of sort. Might not be physically, but in terms of mental presence and mental capacity. Uh, it, it, uh, it suggests that the presidency is probably poorly coordinated in terms of the layers of power and the layers of authority, and it does water now. I would expect for a nation state, the highest political level of authority, which is typified by the presidency, should be better organized, should be better coordinated, should be better structured in terms of who exercises what authority. And now,
Now, Dr. Shetelu, let's look at some of the takeaways from the revelations from the National Security Advisor. Firstly, which is one of the most potent allegations, was that Mr. Kyari has been overriding decisions already taken by the president. Isn't that treasonable?
it's amazing to read such in the media. I mean that a hit to the president would override the decision of an elected president. I do not have empirical evidence that the chief of staff, has been overriding the decisions of the president.
But the allegation by the National Security Advisor, based on the memo which was written, was that the Chief of Staff has flagrantly been discarding decisions already taken by the President to impose his own recommendations on the government. Isn't that a genuine allegation? I mean,
Well, it is. It's a serious allegation. It's disturbing and quite worrisome. If where it is established that the chief of staff and his coterie of you know a coterie of workers are actually undermining the decision of the president, and there would be implications, for the presidency and for the state. Well, I need to make this point. The president, the president has probably created the basis for this kind of situation where it happens. And how do I mean? It was elected on the basis of a national mandate, that crisscrossed the country in terms of ethnic and, sectional and sectarian and professional. orientations, and so on and so forth. But when he became president, he chose to close the shop, and he restricted, the retinue of advisors, to individuals, officials, who probably had relationships with him in the last 20, 25, 30 years. He didn't have the broadness of mind to appoint officials, who were not necessarily close to him, who perhaps he did not necessarily know. So to the extent that there has been allegation that his government is nepotist, and that the Buhari government, it's probably pursuing a nascent, maybe though subtle Hausa Fulani agenda. It's also not a coincidence. It's unfortunate we're discussing at this level. If we had to consider the ethnic origins of his closets, the largely of northern backgrounds.
And interestingly, both officials that we're talking about are from the same state.
So it's quite disturbing that in a multi-ethnic society, in a federal state, but the retinue of officials at the level of the presidency will reflect one or two regions of the country. That itself is not the best. In terms of ideas, in terms of perspectives, in terms of predilections, in terms of, broad views about Nigeria and so on and so forth. But I also appreciate that within the North, and within the northern elite, as typified by his advisors, there are fractions. And they're equally, there are underground struggle for power.
Supremacy. Let's look at the fractured part. I mean, part of the other takeaways from the memo has to do with the fact that Mr. Abba Kyari has been holding sensitive meetings with security chiefs, diplomats, without the NSA. I mean, doesn't that call for concern? Should the chief of staff be meeting or summoning security chiefs, including the chief of army staff, the chief of the air staff, the chief of naval staff, the police IG, and without the national security advisor, and as it relates to the country's security architecture?
Well, I appreciate the fears. If it happens, it is sacrilege. It is preposterous that the chief of staff, I repeat, the chief of staff will convene a security meeting, without the knowledge of the national security advisor who has been appointed by the president. Well, I would also react this way, The little I'd read about the president in the media, is a reticent person, because we need to do a psychoanalysis of the president, and that should assist to explain what he does, why he does it, and why some individuals, take some decisions on his behalf. He's a rather reticent person. It's an introvert of sort. He keeps to himself. He talks a little. So I could derive that the president will probably know about, the unofficial and illegal authorities the chief of staff has been exercising. I imagine that the president concedes to him, and also when the president has not issued a comment, has not issued a statement, either denied or confirmed those allegations and so on and so forth. Interestingly, as a student of politics, I know about what we call the locus of power, you know, the locus of power describes who exercises authority in concrete terms within a government at the level of the legal sovereign. And the legal sovereign includes the judiciary, executive, and the legislature. But in this case, the executive. Ordinarily, the executive president in a presidential system such as Nigeria, it's is almost unarguably the legal sovereign. But no, but Nigeria is a peculiar circumstance where the president, you know, is aging, you know, is fiscally weak, is not mentally competitive, intellectually competitive. He struggled with his health at the point, and subsequently he's been overwhelmed with the myriad of problems confronting Nigeria's political economy. I imagine that some of his aides, including the, you know, particularly, you know, the chief of staff, is somewhat intelligent, somewhat smart, you know, somewhat bold and audacious, you know, and who has been able to identify the weaknesses of the president and who consciously chose to exploit it, you know, for parochial and group advantage. You know, interestingly, the president is not making any point about it. He's not protesting, and he's not challenging, and he's not bothered. So he's not giving any idea that Abba Kyari is usurping his role, or might be removed, or might be substituted, and so on and so forth. The point I'm making is, I'm afraid I perceive consent, subtle consent, on-the-ground consent by the president.
That's a serious indictment of the president himself. Doctor, let's look at the implications of this fallout between these presidential aides, so to say. I mean, some are, based on your analysis at this point in time, of the opinion that this battle for supremacy, so to say, or this fraction within the top presidential aides actually reflects the lack of synergy and hierarchical coordination that taints Buhari's administration. Doesn't mean that the president himself, Muhammadu Buhari, is no longer in charge.
Well, before I react, I'd like to pose this question, and we should think about it. Why would Chief of Staff convene a security meeting of sorts, and some of the service chiefs who should be reporting to the President Commander-in-Chief would attend? One, it gives me the perception that the service chiefs, you know, respects the Chief of Staff in terms of the locus of power and appreciates them. And secondly, the Chief of Staff probably sees, I mean, the service chiefs, or some of the service chiefs probably sees the Chief of Staff as a de facto president, you know, who is shadow president for the elected president. You know, I assume that some of the Chief of Staffs, if not all the Chief of Staffs, should be familiar with the power configuration and the power politics within the presidency, and they'll probably know, you know, who in concrete terms is exercising authority. And that will probably explain why some of the security chiefs would defer to Abba Kyari and not Monguno. So I imagine, maybe we should make this a hypothetical phrase. If Monguno, National Security Advisor Monguno, Major General retired, were to call a security meeting, you know, without the president, you know, as it did Kyari, would security chiefs attend such meeting? This is hypothetical. You know, do you know what? The little I know about the presidency, particularly in Nigeria, you know, it's a highly politicized place. You know, heavily politicized. Every issue is politicized, and there is daily and perpetual contestation for the soul of the presidency. But the presidency is adult stage. It's adult stage. There's no doubt about it. The vice president is it's nearly a ceremonial vice president. Power does not lie with him. And also, some of the powers he had exercised had been relocated to some other bodies. And it is deliberate.
Dr. Seteolu,
Yes, please.
security experts and other analysts have been calling for the president to fire both the NSA and the chief of staff at this point in time. Do you think that President Muhammadu Buhari, under this present circumstances, will fire any of this?
It is unlikely. But I need to make...
But what would be the implication of not doing that at this point in time?
Well, let me make this point as a political scientist. Nigeria practices a presidential system, and the president had appointed the security chiefs. The security chiefs are accountable to the president, theoretically. The security chiefs exercise the officers, exercises the powers and functions and responsibilities of the officers at the discretion of the executive president. So we should bear that in mind. You know? So that probably explains the current situation where the president appears to be satisfied despite outcries, you know, and discontent about the performances of the service chiefs. Okay, of course I'm familiar with the agitations, increasing agitation that that the service chiefs should be replaced and substituted. And the argument is that we should probably contend with new ideas and new attitudes, and maybe relatively younger, soldiers, who would have the energy and maybe greater drive, to contend the multi dimensions of the security crisis in Nigeria and so on and so forth. Well, just a minute. Well, it's neither here nor there. It's neither here nor there. My worry is, and maybe I should pose it at the level of a question. Would the security crisis in Nigeria abate with the appointment of new service chiefs? Okay? If you ask me, I'm not quite sure. My worries are these. The problems are institutional. The problems are deep-rooted, in the structure of the Nigerian state and the structure of power relations and the presidency. The problems are deep-rooted in the governance crisis in Nigeria and so on and so forth. So, if you ask me, it might be palliative. It might be palliative to substitute the security chiefs. If you ask me, we need more concrete and far-reaching and deeper reflections on the security crisis. There's no doubt there's a security crisis. It is threatening the future and the survival of Nigeria as a nation state. Nigeria is a fragile state as it is. And it's also a failing state. And Nigeria might cease to exist in 1 or 2 decades at the rate the centrifugal forces are exacerbated.
One of the other issues or implications that a lot of Nigerians are also concerned about is the fact that this altercation between the National Security Advisor and the President Chief of Staff is enough to erode the credibility of the leadership of this current regime. Do you agree with that, sir?
I agree. There have been worse issues. There have been several other issues. The question I would rather ask is, how much of credibility does this government possess? How much of credibility? So, it's
the opposition party, the People's Democratic Party, has demanded a thorough investigation into the fallout and lamenting that it's potentially detrimental to the future of this country. Do you agree with this, sir?
It is detrimental. It is dangerous.
Should there be an investigation? And do you see an investigation?
Well, there should be sufficient basis to conduct investigation. But you know what the Nigeria peculiar situation is. What will be the outcome of the investigation? And would the presidency, make it a public issue? Would the presidency place it in the public domain? Would they call for public discussion on the results, on the reports of the investigation? And would the presidency, take actions in terms of maybe either suspending or dismissing or sacking some officials in the light of those reports? Because the presidency has a character. Is he audacious? Is he audacious? Does he have the character? Has he shown the predilection, to reach such concrete and far-reaching actions when it matters? No, it doesn't, if you ask me.
Let's also look at the National Assembly itself, which has actually kept mum as far as this issue is concerned, which is a serious indictment to them. I mean, what do you see the reaction of shouldn't the National Assembly at this point in time be checkmating the executive arm of government? Perhaps it would have curbed the excesses of the Chief of Staff.
Well,
some have alleged that the National Assembly is just a rubber stamp of the presidency.
Yes. But
and that's why we have this. I mean,
that's right. But I need to make the point. Abba Kyari does not report to the National Assembly. He reports to the president. But though the National Assembly might not be calling Abba Kyari to appear before it, maybe National Assembly, within the context of law, will probably be inviting the Minister of Defense, who is a political head, to explain, the rumbles in the security, the security arm, yes. But beyond that, it's ordinarily the National Assembly should check, and the presidency should balance the National Assembly in terms of the exercise of political powers. But the increasing trend is that the National Assembly appears compliant, quite easily compliant to the preferences of the presidency, and Nigeria's democracy might be the worse for it. The issue is serious, to discuss on the floor of the National Assembly. The issue is serious to constitute the basis for emotion, to discuss. To discuss the fallouts and the consequences and the implications for the country. It is serious enough to probably, to invite the service chiefs, and the defense minister and the NSA to the National Assembly, and probably the committee meetings, to explain what had happened and what is happening and what will likely happen, and so on and so forth.
Finally, Dr. Seteolu, what does this portend for the escalating insecurity in the country at this point in time?
Well, if you ask me, what would likely happen where there's incongruity in the security, apparatus, the insurgents, the kidnappers, and the rest of it would likely have the space, and the security crisis will likely deepen. And it will also increasingly call to question the capacity, and the capability of this president to address the recurring and persistently, embarrassing security crisis in Nigeria. There's no doubt about it.
Dr. Seteolu, thank you very much for your insightful analysis.